The silence in the Manhattan courtroom was deafening, broken only by the sharp, mocking laughter of the defense attorney. He held up a crumpled grocery receipt like a weapon. "Your Honor," he sneered, looking down at the woman in the scuffed blazer. "Mrs. Thorne earns $32,000 a year. She clips coupons for cat food, and she expects my client, a CEO, to treat her as an equal partner." Even the judge smirked, shaking his head at her pathetic financial declaration. They thought they were crushing a helpless librarian. They didn't know that the binder resting under her trembling hand didn't contain debts. It contained the deed to the very land this courthouse was built on. Elena wasn't broke. She was a sleeping dragon, and they had just woken her up. The air conditioning in courtroom 304 of the New York State Supreme Court was set to a temperature best described as punitive. But for Elena Vance, the chill didn't come from the vents. It radiated from the mahogany table across the aisle. There sat Marcus Thorne, her husband of 5 years, or rather, the man currently spending $600 an hour to ensure she walked away with nothing but the lint in her pockets. Marcus looked impeccable, as he always did. He wore a charcoal Tom Ford suit, the fabric catching the dull fluorescent lights, and a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than Elena's entire projected earnings for the next decade. He didn't look at her. He was too busy whispering something amusing to his lead counsel, Sterling Archibald. Sterling Archibald was a man whose reputation preceded him like a foul odor. A partner at Archibald, Crane and Associates, he was known in Manhattan divorce circles as the Butcher of Wall Street. He didn't just win cases, he dismantled human beings. "Mrs. Thorne," Sterling's voice boomed, startling the court reporter. He remained seated, a subtle power move that irritated Eleanor. "Let us review your financial affidavit one more time, shall we? Just to be absolutely certain we haven't missed a zero somewhere." Elena stood up. She smoothed the skirt of her navy suit. It was polyester, bought off the rack at Macy's 3 years ago. It shone slightly at the elbows. "Everything is accurate, Mr. Archibald," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Is it?" Sterling stood up now, picking up a document with 2 fingers as if it were soiled. "You claim your annual income as a junior archivist at the New York Public Library is $32,500. Net. That is correct." "And your assets?" Sterling scoffed, glancing at the gallery where a few of Marcus's tech bro friends were sitting, ready to witness the show. "A 2014 Honda Civic, a savings account with $2,000 and, let me see here, a cat named Barnaby?" Laughter rippled through the courtroom. Even the bailiff cracked a smile. Marcus finally looked at her then, a smirk playing on his lips. It was the same look he used to give her when she burned the toast, a look of profound disappointment mixed with pity. "Barnaby is a family member," Elena said, her chin lifting slightly. "He's an asset with a negative equity, Mrs. Thorne," Sterling shot back. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this is a farce. We are wasting the court's time. The plaintiff is asking for spousal support based on a lifestyle she claims she helped build. But look at her. She brought nothing into the marriage, and she contributed nothing to the estate. My client, Mr. Thorne, built Thorne Logistics from the ground up while his wife was busy organizing the Dewey Decimal System." Judge Silas Harrison, a man known for his impatience and his bias toward the wealthy elite of the city, peered over his spectacles. He looked at Eleanor with distinct, unimpressed boredom. "Miss Vance, I will revert to your maiden name as the dissolution is imminent. Do you have any rebuttal to the pre-nuptial agreement presented by the defense?" Judge Harrison asked. "The one stating that what is yours, and what is his is his." "I signed that under duress, Your Honor," Elena said. "Marcus told me it was just a formality for his board of directors. He promised it would never be used. A promise isn't a contract, sweetheart. Marcus spoke up for the first time. His voice was smooth, deep, and utterly devoid of warmth. And neither is love. Sterling Archibald laughed, a sharp, barking sound. Precisely. Your Honor, we move to dismiss the request for alimony. Furthermore, we are counter-suing for the legal fees. It is offensive that a woman of such limited means is dragging a captain of industry through the mud simply to beg for a handout. Sterling walked closer to the witness stand, invading Eleanor's personal space. He smelled of expensive scotch and aggression. "Admit it, Eleanor," Sterling hissed, loud enough for the mic to catch. "You were a charity case. Marcus picked you up from that dusty library because you were quaint. Simple. Low maintenance. But now you're trying to act like a partner. You couldn't even afford the gas to drive to this courthouse without Marcus's credit card." Elena looked down at her hands. They were trembling. Not from fear, though they didn't know that. They were trembling from the sheer effort of holding back the truth. "I paid for my own gas," she whispered. "Speak up," Judge Harrison barked. "The court cannot hear you, and frankly, I am losing patience with this poor little match girl routine. If you cannot prove substantial financial contribution to the Thorne estate, I am inclined to rule in favor of the defendant immediately. You have a salary of a teenager working a summer job, Miss Vance. Stop pretending you belong in this tax bracket." The insult hung in the air. A salary of a teenager. Elena closed her eyes. She remembered the day she met Marcus. She remembered why she had hidden everything. She wanted to be loved for herself, not for the staggering weight of the legacy attached to her bloodline. She had played the role of the struggling archivist so well that she had convinced everyone, even the man she promised to love forever. "I need a recess," Elena said suddenly, her eyes snapping open. They weren't watery anymore. They were cold. "I need to consult with my additional counsel." "Additional counsel?" Sterling laughed, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. "You don't even have primary counsel, Elena. You're representing yourself because you couldn't afford a retainer." "I have a lawyer," Elena said, her voice dropping an octave, losing the waver. "He's just notoriously late." As if on cue, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom groaned open. The sound was heavy, commanding. The room turned. Sterling Archibald stopped laughing. Marcus Thorne sat up straighter, his brow furrowing. Walking down the center aisle was not a legal aid overflow attorney. It was a man in a three-piece suit that made Marcus's Tom Ford look like a department store clearance item. He carried a leather briefcase that looked older than the American Constitution. He had silver hair, a hawk-like nose, and walked with the casual arrogance of a man who owned the building. It was Nathaniel Rothschild Vane, senior partner at Vane, Sterling and Cromwell, the kind of lawyer who didn't take divorce cases. He took international treaty disputes. He represented royalty. "Apologies for the tardiness, Your Honor," Nathaniel said, his voice like crushed velvet. He didn't bow. He barely nodded. Traffic on Fifth Avenue was dreadful. "I am here to represent Mrs. Elena Vance." Sterling Archibald looked as if he had swallowed a live fish. "Nathaniel? You're representing her. On a pro bono basis, I assume?" Nathaniel stopped at the defense table. He looked at Sterling, then at Marcus, and finally, he winked at Eleanor. "Pro bono?" Nathaniel chuckled, a dry, terrifying sound. "Oh no, Mr. Archibald. My client can afford me. In fact, she could afford to buy your firm and turn it into a storage unit for her winter coats. Now, shall we proceed?" To understand the explosion that was about to occur in courtroom 304, one has to understand the silence that preceded it. the silence of Eleanor's life for the last 5 years. Eleanor Vance had met Marcus Thorne in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, a cliché that Marcus loved to recount at dinner parties because it made him sound grounded. It was a rainy Tuesday in November. Elena was sitting in the back, wearing an oversized knit sweater, reading a first edition of The Great Gatsby. Though the dust jacket was removed so no one would know its value, she was drinking a small black coffee because she hated waste, not because she couldn't afford a latte. Marcus had breezed in, talking loudly on his headset, creating a whirlwind of energy. He was charismatic, handsome, in a jagged, hungry sort of way. He had spilled his espresso on her book. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," he had said, genuinely mortified. He grabbed napkins, dabbing at the pages. "I'm a clumsy idiot. Let me replace it." "It's fine," Elena had said, quickly pulling the book away before he could see the publisher's mark from 1925. "It's just a paperback." "I insist. I'm Marcus." "Elena." They dated for 6 months before she introduced him to her apartment. It was a studio in Queens with a radiator that clanked and a view of a brick wall. It was real. She actually lived there, but it was a carefully constructed stage set. Elena came from the Vance dynasty. In Europe, the name Vance, originally van der Hoeven, was synonymous with shipping, steel, and old banking money. Her grandmother, Dame Margaret Vance, had practically raised her after her parents died in a skiing accident in Gstaad. Dame Margaret was a woman of iron principles who had drilled one lesson into Elena's head. Wealth attracts parasites. Hide your gold, and you will see people's true faces. So when Elena moved to New York, she legally changed her residency, buried her trust funds under a complex web of shell companies managed by Nathaniel Rothschild Vane, and took a job she genuinely loved, restoring old manuscripts at the library. She wanted to know if someone could love Elena the nerd, Elena the quiet girl, Elena with the frizzy hair and the paint-stained fingers. Marcus seemed to pass the test. He didn't care about her money, because he thought she didn't have any. He liked that she was low maintenance. He liked that she looked up to him. He liked being the provider. "I'll take care of you, Elle," he had said when he proposed, sliding a modest 1-carat diamond onto her finger. "I'm going to make it big with Thorne Logistics, and you won't have to worry about rent ever again." She had cried. She thought it was romantic. She didn't realize then that his desire to take care of her was actually a desire to control her. The cracks started appearing 2 years into the marriage, as Thorne Logistics took off, fueled by a sudden influx of angel investment, which, unbeknownst to Marcus, came from a venture capital firm secretly owned by Elena's estate. Marcus changed. He became obsessed with status. He started critiquing her clothes. "Why do you wear that thrift store junk to the gala, Elena? You're embarrassing me. Can't you get your hair blown out? You look like you just woke up. Don't talk about your library job with the investors. Just nod and smile. Tell them you're in philanthropy." He stopped seeing her as a partner and started seeing her as an accessory that needed polishing, and when he couldn't polish her enough, he decided to trade her in. The end came on their 5th anniversary. Elena had prepared a surprise, a handwritten letter where she planned to finally tell him the truth. She was pregnant, or she thought she was, a false alarm as it turned out, and she wanted to start their family with no secrets. She was going to reveal the trust fund, the villas in Como, the penthouse on Park Avenue that sat empty. But Marcus came home early, flanked by Sterling Archibald. "Sit down, Elena," Marcus had said, not even taking off his coat. "This isn't working." "What?" She had dropped the letter. It slid under the sofa. "I've outgrown this," he gestured vaguely at her, at the apartment, at their life. I need a partner who understands my world. Someone with pedigree. I've met someone else. Her name is Victoria. Her father owns the tech firm we're merging with. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. You're leaving me for a merger? Don't be dramatic, Marcus sighed. Sterling here has the papers. Since we signed the prenup, it's clean. You get $20,000 to move out. You keep the car. I keep the condo and the dog. We don't have a dog, Marcus. We have a cat. Whatever. You keep the cat. That was the moment love died. And in the ashes of that love, something colder, harder, and much more dangerous was born. Elena picked up the papers. She didn't cry. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw a small, insecure man standing on a pile of money he thought made him a giant. You want to do this by the book, Marcus? She had asked quietly. Strictly by the book, Sterling had sneered. The law is the law. Okay, Elena said. Then let's go to court. Now, back in the present day, Elena watched Nathaniel Rothschild Vane place his briefcase on the table. The backstory was over. The lesson was about to begin. Nathaniel turned to the judge. Your Honor, before you dismiss the alimony claim based on my client's poverty, I would like to submit Exhibit A into evidence. What is this? Judge Harrison asked, eyeing the thick, velvet-bound document Nathaniel produced. This, Nathaniel said, his voice ringing through the silent courtroom, is the founding charter of the Vance Holloway Trust, and if you look at the beneficiary line, you will see a familiar name. Marcus leaned forward, squinting. Sterling froze. Elena just smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in 6 months. Judge Silas Harrison was a man who prided himself on his composure. He had presided over mob trials, high-stakes corporate espionage cases, and celebrity divorces that splashed across the tabloids. Nothing rattled him. But as he stared at the document Nathaniel Rothschild Vane had placed before him, his composure fractured. He adjusted his glasses. He blinked. He looked up at Elena, who was currently picking a piece of lint off her polyester skirt, and then back down at the paper. Mr. Archibald, the judge said, his voice unusually strained. Are you aware of the contents of the Vance Holloway Trust? Sterling Archibald sneered, waving a dismissive hand. Some pittance left by a dead grandmother, I assume? A few savings bonds? Maybe a cottage in the Catskills? Your Honor, if Miss Vance has hidden a few $1,000s, we are happy to amend the settlement to include it. But it hardly changes the fact that she is a financial burden on my client. It is not a cottage, Judge Harrison said, his face paling, and it is certainly not a few $1,000s. Then what is it? Marcus snapped, losing his cool. Does she have a secret bank account with 10 grand in it? Fine. Take it off the alimony. Can we wrap this up? I have a board meeting at 2. You might want to cancel that meeting, Mr. Thorne, Nathaniel said smoothly. He turned to the gallery. You see, my client, Elena Vance, born Elena van der Hoven, is the sole beneficiary of the van der Hoven shipping empire. But that is merely her European portfolio. In America, she operates under the Vance Holloway umbrella. Sterling froze. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. Vance Holloway? That's a holding company. They own half of Midtown. Correct, Nathaniel nodded. And more importantly, for the purposes of this specific moment in time, they own the ground lease for several government buildings in Lower Manhattan. Nathaniel walked over to the window of the courtroom, looking out at the grey city skyline. Mr. Archibald, you mocked my client for being unable to afford gas. You mocked her for her pathetic contribution to the marriage. You claimed she brought nothing to the table. Nathaniel turned back, his eyes hard as flint. "Are you aware that this courthouse, the very building we are standing in right now, sits on land owned by the Vance Halloway Trust?" The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens after a bomb goes off, before the screaming starts. Marcus laughed nervously. That's impossible. She's a librarian. She eats ramen noodles." "She eats ramen noodles because she likes them, Marcus," Nathaniel said. "And she works at the library because she believes in the preservation of history. Unlike you, she does not require a Lamborghini to feel important." Judge Harrison cleared his throat, looking at Elena with a newfound, terrifying respect. "Ms. Vance, is this true? You are the landlord of the New York State Supreme Court." "Technically, the trust is the landlord, Your Honor," Elena said softly. "But I control the trust, and I believe the lease is up for renegotiation next year. I've been thinking of raising the rent. The maintenance in this building is appalling. The air conditioning is far too cold." Judge Harrison immediately reached for the thermostat on the wall behind him and turned it up. "Noted, Miss Vance. Noted." Sterling Archibald looked like he was having a cardiac event. He scrambled through his papers. This is irrelevant. The prenup. The prenup states that all assets acquired before the marriage remain separate property. Her trust is separate. Marcus's company is separate. So fine, she's rich. Good for her. That means she doesn't need alimony. Case closed. We withdraw the request for legal fees. We just want the divorce granted. Sterling was trying to cut his losses. He realized he had just poked a sleeping leviathan, and he wanted to get his client out of the water before they were swallowed whole. "Not so fast, Sterling," Nathaniel said, holding up a finger. "You were so eager to enforce the prenuptial agreement a moment ago. Let's look at Clause 14, Section B, the bad faith clause." Marcus squinted. "What bad faith? I haven't done anything illegal." Clause 14 states, Nathaniel recited from memory, that if either party can prove that the other entered the marriage under false pretenses regarding their financial solvency, or used the marriage to defraud the other partner, the prenuptial agreement is voided, and all assets become community property subject to equitable distribution. "I didn't defraud her," Marcus shouted, standing up. "I'm the one with the money. I'm the CEO of Thorn Logistics. She's the fraud. She hid billions of dollars from me." "She hid her assets to protect herself from fortune hunters," Nathaniel countered calmly, which, as it turns out, was a wise decision. "But you, Mr. Thorn, did you hide your assets, or did you hide your debts?" Marcus sat back down, hard. His eyes darted to the side. "What are you talking about?" Sterling demanded, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Elena," Nathaniel said, turning to her, "would you like to do the honors? Or shall I?" Elena stood up. She walked over to the defense table. She didn't look like a librarian anymore. She stood with the posture of a woman whose ancestors had commanded fleets of ships. She placed a single thin file in front of her husband. "Marcus," she said, her voice clear. "I know about Project Icarus." Marcus flinched as if she had slapped him. You can't know about that. That's classified company data." "I know that Thorn Logistics hasn't made a profit in 3 years," Elena continued relentlessly. "I know that you have been using new investor capital to pay off old investors, a classic Ponzi scheme structure. And I know that you are currently $20 million in debt to the Archimedes Group." Sterling looked at his client in horror. "Marcus? Is this true?" "It's just a cash flow issue," Marcus hissed, sweat beading on his forehead. "We're about to close the merger with Victoria's father. The injection of capital will fix everything. Once I marry Victoria, her father buys out the debt, and we're clear." "Ah, yes," Elena nodded. "Victoria. The woman you're leaving me for. The woman whose father owns Omicron Tech." "That's right," Marcus sneered, trying to regain some ground. "Victoria is worth something. Her family builds the future. They don't just sit on old money like you." "Marcus," Elena sighed, a sound of genuine pity. "Who do you think owns the controlling stake in Omicron Tech?" Marcus stared at her. "What?" "Victoria's father is the CEO, yes. But he's an employee. The majority shareholder is the Vance Halloway Trust." The courtroom gasped. Even the court reporter stopped typing, her mouth agape. "I own the company you are trying to merge with," Elena said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "And I own the Archimedes Group, the firm holding your $20 million in debt." She leaned in closer until she was inches from his face. "You aren't a captain of industry, Marcus. You are my employee, and you have been performing very, very poorly." The devastation on Marcus Thorne's face was total. It was the look of a man who had walked onto a battlefield in full armor, only to realize he was naked and holding a toy sword. Sterling Archibald, realizing the ship was sinking, immediately tried to distance himself. He physically scooted his chair a few inches away from Marcus. "Your Honor, I was not informed of my client's financial insolvency. This changes the strategy significantly." "I imagine it does," Judge Harrison said dryly. "Mr. Thorne, is it true? Are you leveraging a merger to cover up massive corporate debt?" It's not that simple," Marcus stammered. "It's high-level finance. You wouldn't understand." "I understand that you just admitted to marrying your mistress for her father's money, only to find out your wife owns her father's company," the judge said. "I believe the term is poetic justice." Nathaniel stepped forward. "Your Honor, since Mr. Thorne has engaged in financial infidelity and fraud, claiming to be solvent while secretly drowning in debt and using marital funds to prop up a failing business, we move to void the prenup under Clause 14. "Granted," Judge Harrison said, slamming his gavel. "The prenup is tossed. We are now looking at equitable distribution of assets and debts." "Wait!" Marcus screamed. "You can't do that. If you void the prenup, she gets half of my company." "Half of your debt, you mean?" Elena asked calmly. "I don't want your company, Marcus. It's a hollow shell. I have enough companies. I want something else." "What?" Marcus pleaded. "What do you want? The condo? Take it. The car? Take it. Just don't bankrupt me. If you call in the Archimedes loan, I go to prison for fraud." Elena looked at him. She remembered the nights he had made her feel small. She remembered the way he had kicked her out of their home because she wasn't pedigreed enough. She looked at Sterling Archibald, the bully who had mocked her cat. "I want a full audit," Elena said. "Public record. I want everyone to know exactly how Thorne Logistics was run. I want the investors to know where their money went. I want the truth to be the only thing left standing." "That will destroy him," Sterling whispered. "He'll be unhireable. He'll be a pariah." "He should have thought of that before he brought a receipt for cat food as evidence in a Supreme Court," Elena said. But the twists weren't over. Just as the judge was about to rule on the audit, the courtroom doors opened again. This time it wasn't a lawyer who walked in. It was a woman. She was tall, blonde, and dressed in a white Chanel suit that probably cost more than Marcus's debt. It was Victoria, the mistress. She didn't look happy. In fact, she looked like she was about to commit a felony. "Victoria!" Marcus gasped, standing up. "Baby, I can explain." "Don't you baby me!" Victoria snapped, her voice echoing off the walls. She marched down the aisle, Her heels clicking like gunshots, she ignored Marcus and walked straight to Eleanor. The courtroom held its breath. Was this going to be a cat fight? A screaming match? Victoria stopped in front of Eleanor. She looked her up and down. Then, to everyone's shock, she reached into a Chanel bag and pulled out a thick envelope. "You're Eleanor?" Victoria asked. "I am," Eleanor said, bracing herself. "I'm Victoria. I'm the idiot who's been sleeping with your husband for the last 8 months." "I know," Eleanor said. "I didn't know," Victoria said, her voice shaking with rage. She turned and glared at Marcus. "He told me you were a leech. He told me you were lazy, uneducated, and refused to work. He told me he was supporting you out of pity." Victoria turned back to Elena. "He also told me he was a billionaire. He told me his company was solvent. He got me to convince my father to fast-track the merger." Victoria handed the envelope to Elena. "My father's forensic accountant took a look at Marcus's books this morning. Because we heard a rumor that Archimedes' group was sniffing around. Do you know what we found?" Elena took the envelope. "He's cooking the books." "He's not just cooking them," Victoria said. "He's deep-frying them. He's been siphoning money from Thorn Logistics into a private offshore account in the Caymans, under the name Vance Holdings." Eleanor's eyes went wide. "He used my name?" "He was setting you up," Nathaniel interjected, his voice low and dangerous. He stepped up to look at the documents. "Marcus was embezzling money from his own investors, hiding it offshore, and putting the account in your name, Elena. If the company collapsed, the feds would have come for you, not him. He was going to frame you for his financial crimes." The courtroom erupted. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a crime scene. Marcus collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Sterling Archibald slowly closed his laptop, put it in his bag, and stood up. "Mr. Archibald?" Judge Harrison asked. "Where are you going?" "Your Honor," Sterling said, his face grim. "I cannot represent a client who has actively engaged in criminal framing of a spouse. It is a conflict of interest, and frankly, I have my own reputation to consider. I am withdrawing as counsel, effective immediately." Sterling looked at Marcus one last time. "Good luck, Marcus. You're going to need a criminal defense attorney, and they don't work for free." Sterling walked out. Marcus was alone. On the other side of the aisle stood his wife, the billionaire he tried to frame. Next to her stood his mistress, the heiress he tried to use, and looming over him was the judge, whose courtroom sat on his wife's land. Elena looked at the documents Victoria had given her. She looked at the offshore account numbers. "You tried to send me to prison," Elena whispered, the reality sinking in. "I loved you. I made you soup when you were sick. I supported your dreams. And you were planning to send me to prison so you could run off with her." Marcus looked up, his eyes red and desperate. It wasn't personal, Elena. It was business. I needed a fall guy. You were just there. You were so quiet, so passive. I didn't think you'd fight back." "That was your mistake," Elena said. She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I would like to amend my petition." "Proceed," Judge Harrison said, leaning forward eagerly. "I am no longer asking for alimony," Elena said. "I am asking for full cooperation with the district attorney's office, and I am suing Marcus Thorne for defamation, fraud, and emotional distress. I am freezing all marital assets, including the offshore account he tried to pin on me. And..." She paused, looking at the cowering man who had once been her world. "And I want the cat back. Barnaby hates you anyway." The steps of the New York State Supreme Court are usually a place of quiet despair or relieved exhales, But when Elena Vance stepped out of the heavy brass doors, the atmosphere was more akin to a red carpet premiere gone wrong. Word had travelled fast. The court reporter had likely texted a friend, who texted a producer, who tweeted the scoop. By the time Elena emerged, shielding her eyes against the afternoon sun, a swarm of reporters was waiting. "Mrs. Thorne, is it true you own the building? Miss Vance, are you really the heir to the Van der Hoven fortune? Marcus, Mr. Thorne, is it true you're being investigated for embezzlement?" Marcus stumbled out behind her, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He tried to cover his face with his suit jacket, but the cameras were merciless. He wasn't the golden boy of tech anymore. He was prey. Elena stopped. She didn't run to a waiting car. She stood at the top of the stairs, the wind catching the hem of her cheap polyester skirt. Nathaniel Rothschild Vane stepped up beside her, opening a black umbrella, not for rain, but to create a barrier of privacy. "Do not say a word, Elena," Nathaniel murmured. "Let the silence do the work." But Marcus couldn't stay silent. He saw the cameras and his narcissism kicked in. He lowered his jacket, trying to muster his old charm. "It's a misunderstanding," Marcus shouted to the press. "My wife and I are going through a complex negotiation. The allegations of fraud are baseless." Elena turned slowly. She looked at him with an expression so cold it could have frozen the Hudson River. "There is no negotiation, Marcus," she said, her voice soft, but carried by the microphones thrust in her direction. "And I am not your wife. I am your creditor." She turned to the sleek black limousine that had just pulled up to the curb. Not a rental, but a private car, with the Vance family crest subtly embossed on the door. A driver in full livery stepped out and opened the door. "Get in, Elena," Nathaniel said. "We have work to do." "Wait!" Marcus lunged forward, grabbing Elena's arm. A security guard, one Elena had hired just 20 minutes ago, stepped in, shoving Marcus back. Marcus stumbled, falling onto the concrete steps. "Elena, please," Marcus wheezed, looking up from the ground. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a terrifying desperation. "You can't leave me like this. They'll eat me alive. The investors, the board. If you pull the plug on Thorne Logistics, I'm dead. Literally. I borrowed money from people who don't sue, Elena. They break legs." Elena paused. She looked down at the man who had once been the center of her universe. She remembered how he used to brush her hair away from her face. She remembered how he promised to protect her. "You should have thought about that before you put my name on an offshore account," she said. "You wanted a partner, Marcus? Well, you got one. I'm the silent partner, and I'm closing the business." She got into the car. Nathaniel followed. The door slammed shut, sealing out the noise of the shouting press and her screaming husband. Inside the limousine, the silence was luxurious. It smelled of leather and expensive cologne. "Where to, Miss Vance?" the driver asked. Eleanor took a deep breath. She reached into her purse and pulled out the crumpled receipt for cat food that Sterling Archibald had mocked. She smoothed it out on her lap. "The Thorne Logistics headquarters in Hudson Yards," Elena said. "I believe I have a board meeting to crash." Sitting across from her, Victoria, the mistress, was typing furiously on her phone. She had hitched a ride, ostensibly to give Elena the access codes, but really to save her own skin. "My father is pulling the merger," Victoria said, not looking up. "The press release goes out in 10 minutes. Omicron Tech is distancing itself from Marcus. We're claiming we were victims of his fraud, too." "You were victims," Elena said. "Just not innocent ones." Victoria paused and looked at Elena. "You know, he really did love you, in his own twisted way. He talked about you all the time. He said you were the only thing in his life that was pure. That's why he hated you eventually. You made him feel like a fraud just by existing." "He was a fraud," Nathaniel interjected, pouring a glass of sparkling water. "Elena, we need to move fast. Marcus's CFO is a man named Julian Cross. Do you know him?" "I've met him," Elena nodded. "Slick, greasy. He hit on me at the Christmas party 2 years ago while Marcus was in the bathroom." "Julian is the one who set up the offshore accounts," Nathaniel said. "He's the mechanic. If Marcus is in trouble, Julian will be at the office right now, shredding everything. We need to get there before he wipes the servers." Elena looked out the window as the city blurred by. She wasn't the librarian anymore. She wasn't the victim. "He won't wipe them," Elena said, "because he thinks I'm weak. He thinks I'm just a scorned wife coming for a settlement. He has no idea I'm coming for the crown." The headquarters of Thorn Logistics occupied the top 3 floors of a Glass Needle in Hudson Yards. It was a monument to excess. The lobby featured a waterfall. The walls were lined with modern art that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. When Eleanor walked through the revolving doors, she wasn't wearing a visitor's badge. She was flanked by Nathaniel Rothschild Vane, 2 private security contractors, and a team of forensic accountants she had summoned while in the car. The receptionist, a young woman named Chloe, who had been instructed by Marcus to never let Elena up without an appointment, stood up in alarm. "Mrs. Thorne, you can't be here. Marcus isn't back from court yet, and Mr. Cross said no visitors." "I'm not a visitor, Chloe," Elena said, not breaking stride. "I'm the landlord, and the bank." She breezed past the security turnstiles. When the guard stepped forward, Nathaniel simply held up a court order Judge Harrison had signed 5 minutes before the session ended. "Injunction," Nathaniel barked, "freezing all assets and granting immediate access to the court-appointed trustee. That's her." They took the elevator to the 40th floor. The silence in the lift was thick with tension. Elena checked her reflection in the polished steel doors. She fixed her hair. She looked tired, but her eyes were burning with a cold, blue fire. The elevator dinged. The 40th floor was chaos. Phones were ringing unanswered. Staff were huddled in corners, whispering. The news from the courthouse had broken. They knew the ship was sinking. Eleanor walked straight toward the double-glass doors of the executive boardroom. She could hear shouting from inside. She pushed the doors open. Around the massive oval table sat the board of directors, 6 men and 2 women who had enabled Marcus for years. At the head of the table stood Julian Cross. He was stuffing documents into a briefcase, his tie loosened, sweat staining his armpits. "We liquidate," Julian was yelling. "We sell off the IP to the Chinese buyers today, wire the cash to the Caymans, and declare bankruptcy by Monday. If we wait, the wife gets everything." "The wife," Elena announced, stepping into the room, "is already here." The room went dead silent. Julian dropped a stack of papers. "Elena." Julian let out a nervous, breathless laugh. "What are you doing here? Look, honey, this is a bad time. Marcus is in some legal trouble, and we're trying to protect the marital assets for you." "Cut the crap, Julian," Elena said. She walked to the head of the table. "Move." "Excuse me?" "I said move. You're sitting in my chair." Julian's eyes narrowed. "Now listen here, you little—" "Mr. Cross," Nathaniel's voice cut through the room like a whip. "I am Nathaniel Rothschild Vane, and these gentlemen behind me are forensic accountants from Deloitte. You are currently holding documents that belong to the court. Put them down, or you will be arrested for obstruction of justice alongside your embezzlement charges." Julian looked at the security guards. He looked at the accountants. He swallowed hard and stepped away from the chair. Elena sat down. She placed her hands on the mahogany table. She looked at the board members. She recognized them all. There was Simon Lagrange, who had laughed when Marcus made jokes about Elena's coupon clipping. There was Patricia Moore, who had advised Marcus to get the prenup in the first place. "You all look very nervous," Elena noted. "Elena, please," Simon stammered. "We didn't know. Marcus lied to us too." "Did he?" Elena opened the folder Victoria had given her. "Because according to these minutes from the Q3 meeting, you authorized the transfer of $4 million to Vance Holdings, the shell company meant to frame me. You signed it, Simon." Simon turned pale. "Here is what is going to happen," Elena said, her voice steady. "I have purchased the outstanding debt Thorn Logistics owes to the Archimedes Group. That makes me your primary creditor. I also own the controlling stake in Omicron Tech, your merger partner. That deal is dead." "So, what do you want?" Patricia asked, trembling. "Are you going to liquidate us?" "Eventually," Elena said. "But first, I want the truth." She turned to Julian Cross. "Julian, you're going to log into the main server. You are going to unlock the encrypted partition where you keep the real books, and you are going to project it onto that screen for everyone to see." "I can't do that," Julian sneered, trying to regain some bravado. "That's self-incrimination. I have rights." "You have two choices," Nathaniel said, leaning in. "Choice A, you cooperate, and Ms. Vance recommends leniency to the district attorney. You do 3 years in a minimum security facility. Choice B, you refuse, we crack the encryption anyway, which we will, and Ms. Vance sues you civilly for every dime you have ever earned. You go to maximum security for 20 years, and your children grow up in a shelter." Julian looked at Elena. He saw no mercy there, only calculation. He walked to the computer console. His fingers shook as he typed in the password. The large screen at the end of the room flickered to life. Spreadsheets appeared. Chats appeared. Emails appeared. It was worse than Eleanor thought. There were emails between Marcus and Julian mocking the investors. "Stupid sheep," Marcus had written. There were expenses for client entertainment that were actually receipts for escorts, gambling trips to Macau, and diamonds for Victoria. But then a file name caught Elena's eye. Project Librarian. "Open that one," Elena commanded. Julian hesitated. "Elena, you don't want to see that." "Open it." Julian clicked the file. It wasn't financial data. It was a surveillance log. Photos of Eleanor going to work. Photos of her at the grocery store. Photos of her feeding Barnaby. And a document titled Mental Incompetence Strategy. Elena read the first paragraph. Strategy for 2025. If Elena refuses the divorce settlement or fights the prenup, we initiate gaslighting protocol. We plant drugs in the apartment. We pay a doctor to testify she is unstable. We commit her to a facility and assume power of attorney over her personal trust, if any exists. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Elena felt a cold chill wash over her. It wasn't just greed. It was malice. Marcus hadn't just planned to leave her. He had planned to destroy her mind if she became inconvenient. He had been watching her, waiting for the moment to strike. She stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Get out," she whispered. "What?" Simon asked. "Get out!" Elena screamed, picking up a heavy crystal water pitcher and hurling it at the wall. It shattered, raining glass over the expensive carpet. "Every single one of you. You're fired. The board is dissolved. And get out of my building before I have you thrown out the window." The board members scrambled. They grabbed their bags and ran, tripping over each other to get to the door. Only Julian remained, frozen by the console. "You too, Julian," Nathaniel said. "The police are waiting in the lobby." Julian slumped out, defeated. Elena was left alone in the boardroom with Nathaniel and the silent accountants. She was trembling. She looked at the screen, at the photos of herself, unaware, innocent, loving a man who was plotting her demise. She walked over to the window. Far below on the street, she saw flashing lights, police cruisers. They were putting a man in handcuffs. Even from this height, she knew it was Marcus. Nathaniel walked up beside her. He didn't offer a platitude. He just stood there. "He was going to have me committed," Elena said, her voice breaking. "He was going to lock me away." "Power makes people monsters, Elena," Nathaniel said. "But you have something he never had." "What's that?" "You know what it's like to be powerless. That makes you dangerous." Elena wiped a single tear from her cheek. She turned away from the window. "I'm not done," she said. "He has partners. He has the people who funded this scheme. The real money behind Thorn Logistics. They're going to come for me now." "They will," Nathaniel agreed. "What do you want to do?" Elena looked at the shattered glass on the floor. "I want to send them a message," she said. "Liquidate the company. Sell the furniture. Sell the art. Sell the staplers. I want this floor empty by tomorrow morning. I want Thorn Logistics to cease to exist." "And the proceeds?" "Donate it," Elena said, "to the New York Public Library." 3 months had passed since the boardroom massacre at Thorn Logistics. The Glass Needle in Hudson Yards was now empty, its lease terminated, its assets auctioned off to pay creditors. The brand Thorn had been scrubbed from the city skyline as effectively as if it had never existed. Elena sat in the back of the limousine, watching the rain streak against the window. She was no longer wearing polyester. She wore a bespoke silk blazer and trousers tailored to perfection. On her lap sat Barnaby, the cat who had been mocked in a Supreme Court affidavit, now purring contentedly on a cashmere blanket. "Are you sure about this, Elena?" Nathaniel Rothschild Vane asked from the seat across from her. "You don't have to go see him. The lawyers can handle the paperwork." "I know," Elena said, stroking Barnaby's ears. "But he sent a letter. He said he has something that belongs to me. And I need to close the book." The car didn't stop at a luxury hotel. It stopped at the grim grey entrance of the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan. Marcus had been denied bail. The flight risk was deemed too high, given his attempt to set up offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. He was awaiting trial for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Elena walked into the visitor's room. The air smelled of bleach and despair. When Marcus was brought in, the change was shocking. The tan was gone, replaced by a sallow grey complexion. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was limp. He looked smaller. He sat down behind the plexiglass. He picked up the phone. "You came," he said, his voice raspy. "You said you had something of mine," Elena replied, her voice cool and detached. "I do." Marcus reached into his pocket, but the guard stopped him. The guard took a small, folded piece of paper from Marcus and slid it through the slot. Elena unfolded it. It was a photograph, a Polaroid of them from that first day in the coffee shop, holding the coffee-stained book. They looked young. They looked happy. "I found it in my wallet," Marcus said. "They let me keep it. I wanted you to have it. To remind you that it wasn't all a lie, Elle. I did love you. Before the money. Before the pressure." Eleanor looked at the photo. For a second, her heart softened. She remembered the boy who had apologized for ruining her book. "Why did you do it, Marcus?" she asked softly. "We had enough. Even with just your salary, we had enough." "It's never enough," Marcus whispered, his eyes hollow. You don't understand. When you come from nothing, you always feel like you're one bad day away from being nothing again. I wanted to be a god, Elena. I wanted to be like you. I just didn't know you were... you. You didn't need to be a god, Elena said, tucking the photo into her pocket. You just needed to be a husband. Can you help me? Marcus asked, the desperation creeping back in. I'm not asking for a lot, just a character reference. If you speak for me, the judge might give me 5 years instead of 15. Please, Elle, I'm drowning in here. Elena looked at him. She thought about the mental incompetence strategy file. She thought about how he planned to lock her away in an institution so he could spend her money on his mistress. I can't do that, Marcus, she said. Why not? You have everything. You won. You destroyed my company. You took my reputation. You have the billions. What more do you want? I want you to learn, Elena said. She stood up. I spoke to the district attorney this morning. Marcus's eyes lit up with hope. You did? What did you say? I told them that I would not be pressing charges for the defamation, Elena said. Oh, thank God. Thank you, Elle. However, Elena continued, I also handed over the unredacted files regarding your dealings with the Vance Holloway charitable accounts. You stole from a cancer charity, Marcus, to pay for your car lease. Marcus's face fell. No, you didn't. I did. That adds a mandatory minimum of 10 years to your sentence. Marcus slammed his hand against the glass. You vindictive witch! You set me up! I'm going to rot in here. You're not rotting, Elena said calmly, picking up her purse. You're just finally paying your bill. She turned to leave. Elena! He screamed. Elena, wait! Who's going to protect you? The shadow investors, the guys I borrowed the 20 million from. They know who you are now. They won't let you just walk away with their interest payments. They'll kill you. Elena stopped. She looked back over her shoulder. The shadow investors? She asked. You mean the Krovos syndicate? Marcus froze. How do you know that name? Because, Elena smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. Who do you think rents them their warehouses in New Jersey? Marcus stared at her, his mouth hanging open. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The web of her influence was so vast, so deep, that he had been living inside it the entire time without knowing. Goodbye, Marcus. Elena walked out of the prison and into the bright afternoon sun. The air tasted sweet. She got back into the car. Nathaniel was on the phone, but he hung up as she entered. It's done, Nathaniel said. The syndicate agreed to the new terms. They are writing off the Thorn debt in exchange for, let's call it, preferential treatment on their shipping container leases. They won't bother you. Good, Elena said. She leaned back, closing her eyes. Where to now? The driver asked. The penthouse? The estate in the Hamptons? Elena opened her eyes. She looked at the crumpled receipt for cat food that she still kept in her pocket, a reminder of who she was when she had nothing but her dignity. Take me to the New York Public Library, Elena said. I have a shift starting at 4 p.m. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. You're going to work? Elena, you're worth $11 billion. You don't need to stack books. I don't need to, Elena said, smiling as she looked down at Barnaby. But I like it. It's quiet. And I promised the head librarian I'd finish restoring that first edition of The Great Gatsby. The car pulled away from the curb, merging into the endless flow of New York traffic. Elena Vance had been a victim. She had been a ghost in her own marriage. She had been mocked, belittled, and underestimated. But as the skyline of the city she secretly owned drifted past the window, she knew the truth. She wasn't just a survivor. She was the author of her own story, and for the first time in her life, she was finally holding the pen. The end. And that is how Elena Vance went from being mocked for a grocery store receipt to owning the very ground her husband stood on. Marcus Thorne spent the next 15 years in federal prison, spending his days working in the prison library, ironically, the only job he was now qualified for. Elena never remarried. She dedicated her life to the Vance Holloway Trust, funding libraries, schools, and art programs across the world. She continued to work her Tuesday shifts at the New York Public Library, where nobody knew that the quiet woman stamping their books could buy the entire city block. It's a brutal lesson for Marcus, and for anyone who judges a book by its cover. Be careful who you step on comfortably. They might be the ground holding you up. What do you think? Did Elena go too far by adding the extra 10 years to Marcus's sentence? Or did he deserve every second of it for planning to have her committed? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of supreme revenge, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. We drop new dramas every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for watching, and remember, the quietest people often have the loudest secrets. See you next time.
Thanks for watching.